Okay, imagine this. You got an idea for a great tech startup and you think it's going to change the world, but you have a problem. You just don't have the engineers that you need to make it come true. Why? Well, it's obvious. It's hard to find engineers. There's a lot of competition, and when you're trying to keep your burn rate low, you need to conserve cash. Now, imagine you had a partner who could provide you with almost 500,000 on demand developers right away. Now, this isn't another outsourced agency. They'll actually add engineers directly to your team and even relocate top talent to Canada for you. Let me introduce you to VanHack. Startups of all sizes choose VanHack because they only offer handpicked developers with 3 or more years of experience and who have strong portfolios. Great Canadian tech startups like Neo Financial, Fair, Wattpad, Applyboard, and League have worked with VanHack and they had amazing experiences. Go to vanhack.com and check out their talent pool without having to log in and see for yourself. And when you sign up, tell them Evan from The Hard Part sent you for a 25% discount. Float is complete business finance for Canadian companies. They offer modern financial services, powerful software, and industry-leading support designed for every industry and stage of growth. Their integrated suite of products, including corporate cards, FX, bill pay, expense management, and high-yield accounts, gives finance teams everything needed to manage spending and cash flow efficiently so they can help pace with the demands of their business. I'm a huge fan of Float, and almost every founder and investor I meet with in Canada, when we go out somewhere, whips out their Float card, and the team is constantly shipping, and I'm hugely impressed and have been tracking their journey since the beginning. To learn more, visit floatfinancial.com. Just because the economy is uncertain doesn't mean your shred claim has to be. Bloom is all about predictable value. They're the only shred firm that guarantees their work. They meet with you every quarter and show you exactly how much you've accrued. And their pricing is posted online with a cap, so you know what to expect. No guessing, no surprises. Head to shred.ca and see why more Canadian innovators are choosing Bloom as their shred partner. Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Hard Part. The Hard Part is focused on interviewing Canadians in tech, regardless of where they are, whether they're based in Canada, the US, or anywhere else. We dive into the stories, the tactics, trying to get into the meat of what's behind companies, venture firms, operators, and more. We really try to shine a light on Canadian tech. The stories are undertold versus our American counterparts, and sharing these stories is incredibly important to inspire the next generation of builders. Dylan, I'd like to just start with you spent time in Toronto, you spent time in SF, London, New York, you spent time in all these different tech ecosystems. And I'm just kind of curious, your thoughts on, you know, what are some major differences between them? Like, how has that impacted your career, your network, people, founders you've met? Just kind of curious of being exposed to so many different locations, spending a decent amount of time in each of them is just super unique in my opinion.
There's pros and cons to it. The pro is that obviously you get to learn a lot and build like a pretty international network because I think every ecosystem that you named is quite different from all the others. I think Canada and the UK are probably a little bit more similar. And to speak kindly, probably a little bit more conservative, smaller markets, maybe a little bit more welfare-y countries that don't push people to be as ambitious as the States does. But I think working in all these ecosystems has given, influenced me to understand how different countries operate, how founders from all over the world operate. I would say the con of it is you don't get to build the density and depth of network that I think the States has been built upon. The alumni network is like a very common term that you hear in the States, and it can be either based on where you went to school, so people are really proud of the colleges that they went to, or companies that they worked at. People on LinkedIn or Twitter always have X big name company X or X financial institution X because it's like that becomes their stamp of credibility and their alumni network. And as someone who has lived in lots of places but not the States for long, don't have that either academic or professional big name company alumni network. So I think the way to combat that is meeting other expats who have other lived experiences of coming from Canada or Europe or Asia to the States to pursue something. And we all understand the sacrifices we made and become our own version of an alumni network.
What is your thoughts on Canadians in the States? People call it brain drain. There's expats down there. Some people think it's a bad thing. Some people are like great, like they're chasing success, they're going to do well. Like, what are your kind of thoughts on all that? I know it's a very like complex and everyone has different sides. It's very polarizing, I usually find, but like, what are your kind of general thoughts on it?
I think that Canadians in the States are self-selected for highly motivated and driven people. I think you have decided to leave your family, leave your friends, leave a country that more or less offers very affordable healthcare and education to go to a country that doesn't have those things, but you're doing it because you know that it offers, untapped upside potential. And I think everyone should, if they want to, be encouraged to chase where the biggest outcomes, be it as a founder or as an employee, are. And the term brain drain is a controversial term because you're asking people to take a discount to stay in Canada, or you're asking people to start a company in an ecosystem that has less venture dollars and smaller capital markets. And that's fine. I think living in Canada, you don't actually need as much money as you do living in the States. You can live a good life here in those frameworks. But if you're trying to optimize for upside as an employer, as an entrepreneur, it just doesn't make sense. And it's not just a tech thing. Lawyers in Toronto make half of what lawyers in New York make. Doctors make less. It's I think to solve the brain drain systemically, we need to have better compensation structures in Canada or have more capital market activity here to support businesses.
What are some commonalities that you've seen amongst Canadian? Like, obviously, there's folks in every discipline, but if we kind of focus specifically on tech from a founder investor side, like, obviously, I've interviewed a lot of them. We both know there's tons and tons and tons of folks down there. Just kind of curious, like, do you see any commonalities? Do you see any kind of things? Do they really kind of chase their dreams, so to speak, that success aspect? Like, what do you kind of see there?
I think the amazing thing is whether I'm in Boston, Canada, New York, San Francisco, Miami, the Canadians all find each other. So I think that similar to what I was talking about, the alumni network piece is like Canadians love to hang out with other Canadians. And maybe when you're in Canada, there's some sort of patriotism towards, oh, I'm from Toronto or I'm from Calgary or I'm from Montreal. But once you're in the States, you're all Canadian. And people's friendship circles are really professional and social, are really built around fellow Canadians, and we want to help each other. So I find that the Canadians helping other Canadians is like a really common trend. I've seen it in all US cities.
I'd love to dive into kind of like your venture experience and like that'll kind of bleed nicely into like South Park Commons, but just like work at Expa, work at South Park Commons, like on the venture side of things, but both are very like unique in terms of their structure, how they invest. So like I'm just kind of curious on like what you've taken away of like venture investing, yes, but also some like really unique ways about going about it.
Yeah, I'm very fortunate that I've been able to work at three early stage funds. So Founders Factory in the UK, Expa in New York, and now South Park Commons between New York and San Francisco. And so the consistent theme is we're first check investors in most cases, and we are ultimately underwriting the entrepreneur. And I think that's especially true at South Park Commons, where we really are just looking for exceptionally talented and exceptionally motivated people and are very comfortable helping them navigate what kind of business to build or problem to solve. But that has been a consistent theme everywhere I've worked. And I think that is very unique to Silicon Valley and an extent New York, where it's like you are investing in the dream. You are finding people and people that you think have a unique insight or unique talent and are willing to make a bet on them and are willing to work with them and help them figure out that kind of business to build, knowing it might take a long time and knowing there might be numerous pivots along the way. I think that that's very unique to South Park Commons and our investment strategy.
What sort of things are you looking for in individuals, right? Like obviously, like you mentioned earlier, like X big company
Mhm.
had interesting role. Like obviously there's some strength to that. But I'm curious, like after being in these roles for such a long time and at SPC specifically, just kind of like interested on like what kind of things are you looking for? What kind of separates amazing versus great versus good?
I guess I'll take a step back and explain what SPC is, maybe, because I think that would give some color. South Park Commons was started by two of the first employees at Facebook, Ditya and Ruchi, both very much worth Googling in their own right. They were there from 2005 until 2010 or 2011. They then left to start a company together, which was acquired by Dropbox and stayed on to help take Dropbox public. And in both cases, they had a ton of exposure to a really high dense talent network. So at Facebook, it was really young people like building Facebook, and then at Dropbox, it was like an incredible hotspot for engineering talent. And South Park Commons was built out of following those two things up. The thesis of if you create a really tense network of talent, people like they're going to support each other and they're going to be able to help accelerate their ability to start amazing companies. So South Park Commons was started actually as a community for people of all ages, really. People dropping out of college or finishing their PhDs, people who have sold previous companies, or people who are leaving brand name companies to come together to explore technology trends, to do research, to build companies, and we've subsequently been able to raise funds to accelerate the members of our community to build companies off the back of their explorations and support them through that. So when what we're looking for, it's actually not necessarily tied to any specific credential. We're far more interested in your curiosities. So what are the things that like you actually think the future needs to have that you want to create? And then what skills do you have to do that? And I would say what's interesting about us is our fundraise meetings feel more like job interviews than they do pitches, because we're actually trying to get to know you as a founder, as an individual, more than like this made up market size that you've used some consulting report to create.
What other things are you kind of looking for at that stage? Like obviously, like you're talking about, that curiosity. Like what separates like a team or a founder specifically, at the earliest stage? Is it, there's all these general things of like you talk to lots of customers and you move fast. Like I feel like there's like these very general things. Are those like really the things that separate folks, or do you find some other things kind of are a good indicator that success could happen here?
So I think it's twofold. I think the curiosity piece is not always driven by talking to customers. Sometimes it's like a fresh perspective on why does an industry work this way? Like why are we building applied AI solutions for accounting or law or healthcare? Why not reinvent the entire system? So I think that that is sort of the way that we like to, or that I like to hear founders describe the problems that they're going after. The other is like very deeply technical approaches to things. So where, it's not something that, a team today could just use Cursor and Claude to go create, but this is something that it's going to be harder. It's going to take longer. There might be hardware involved. There might be new data sets that are required to be collected. We're actually very comfortable with all those tech risks, but we think if you can, get past it, like you're building a moat in the sense that the technology you have is something that other people can't do. And that's where we're really trying to understand, do you uniquely have the ability to build these things and raise capital to do it? Hardware is capital intensive, but if you can figure it out, the upsides are higher. I guess the third piece I would say is if we're going to invest or support teams or members exploring specific industries, like, do you have a why me as to what you can build real deep connectivity into that? We're investors in a company called Ironsight that doing data productivity and construction sites, and the founder's third generation construction. And, he maybe doesn't look like the typical Silicon Valley entrepreneur, but if you're building hardware and software for construction projects, like he's going to be able to get meetings with someone that, someone leaving Drive for OpenAI wouldn't. And similarly with a company of ours in New York called Profound, that helps brands understand how they appear in AI search. The CEO's last company was in the influencer marketing space and a deep connectivity to the world of marketing and understands it. Again, like there's specific reasons why that founder can get in front of customers ways that others cannot.
I love to talk about kind of just like mindset, like, between different ecosystems, whether we choose Canada, UK, US, because you've been in those three. Just kind of curious on like what you see there. Like obviously founders of South Park Commons, early Facebook, huge company, massive success. I'm curious like how having experiences like that like changes your mindset, your perception of what can be done. And I'm just kind of curious like what you've seen over multiple different ecosystems. If that's just like in the US, it's like, hey, I'm going to do this wild, ambitious, huge thing, potentially might be capital intensive. And it's like everyone around them's just like, yeah, do that. Like, I'm just kind of curious, like if you've seen that kind of trend and if that makes a huge difference.
I don't know if it's a chicken or the egg problem, but in Canada and the UK, I felt like there's a wait in line mentality. It's like you need to have the right to pursue these things or do these things. And that could be starting a company, getting a job, or raising a fund. Where in the US, it's like, it's why not me? It's like we have numerous examples, be it Facebook or Figma or Cursor, of these incredible companies that were started by 21-year-olds or people like just out of college. And it's a mindset of like, I can do anything. I don't need to go and wait in line and wait my turn to pursue this. And I think that the flip side of that is there is infinite amounts of capital for people willing to build something meaningful. So you don't, you can look at the data, but the pre-seed, seed, Series A rounds in Europe or Canada are just much smaller, where there's much more risk capital early on in the US. And I mean, I think there's too much, right? We constantly read about $100 million, $200 million seed rounds, which is funny framing, but the capital's there to allow people to take these swings. And I think as a founder, you have to decide if you want to take that capital, because obviously there's strings attached when you're raising that much that early. But it's there for people systemically to pursue these things where it's just, unfortunately, if you want to pursue something difficult and capital intensive early in other countries, I think you have to move to the US or um, maybe Asia or the Middle East. There's more capital there, but in terms of Europe and Canada, it hasn't really been seen.
If we took kind of like a segue into just focusing on like community for a little bit, I'm just kind of curious, like your thoughts on that. Like, what have we seen like since post COVID, especially? Like, I felt like, everything's been conferences, huge things. Let's get together. Let's do all this thing. Are people kind of burning out from that? Are people looking for more curated things? Like, how are you kind of really seeing community? And I saw South Park Commons, like I see your posts, like just like amazing speakers coming out, probably sharing really maybe not off the record stuff, but they're going a little bit deeper than they would, and maybe if they're in front of like 30,000 people or something.
It's a good question. I think after COVID, people were really excited to just be surrounded by large groups of people again. And that's where I think these massive tech weeks became popular. They weren't at that point, those were about quantity, not necessarily curation and quality. I think it's South Park Commons, but more generally, people want curated quality events on a regular cadence that are smaller and more intimate, where you can actually build deep relationships and learnings versus these large events where you sort of have small talk with hundreds of random people. So at South Park Commons, we're very fortunate that we've been able to interview and have intimate on the record and off the record talks with Sam Altman, with Mark Zuckerberg, with Satya Nadella. I just interviewed fellow Canadian David Baszucki, who is the founder and CEO of Roblox. And why they like to come speak at SPC is because they know our audience is going to be curated to technical founders and engineers. And we're highly, highly selective in who we can attend those events outside of, like, it's people in SPC and then like a selection of external folks. And then we do smaller events, be it breakfast, dinners, roundtables, where they're built around a theme. Everyone in the room is pursuing something similar. It doesn't always have to be entrepreneurs. It could be heads of product in e-commerce or heads of finance in healthcare. Just people that are in similar roles, similar stages of their career, where they want to be surrounded by other people who are going through similar experiences. And candidly, like, that's why I've been doing these events for Canadians in the States, because I find that Canadians want to feel like they're with other people that have shared experiences, be it where they grew up or what they're going through now. So in New York and San Francisco, I've been running dinner series for Canadians, and actually they have been of all ranges of profession. I know this is something you're very passionate about as well, but I think the mistake that a lot of other groups make is like only focus on founders or only focus on investors. But actually, the CFOs of Figma and Fair are Canadian. The chief strategy officer at EA Sports is Canadian. A general counsel for Marc Jacobs, Canadian. Some of the biggest lawyers in New York and San Francisco are Canadian. And these are people with huge expertise and deep networks and a lot of energy and time to give. I think when you get them in a room with founders, with investors, where the common theme is that we're all Canadian, we all want to help each other. And I think that actually that curation is what allows actual collaboration.
For you personally, like, how have you found like getting in touch with people? Like, not so much like tactical, but like, what are some like ways that you've found to like attract folks, get in front of folks? Like, I'm assuming you're not just jumping around networking events, slanging business cards. Like, what have you found is a really authentic way to get in front of people, just build community, build network, connect people?
Yeah, there's many approaches to doing it. Somewhat well, no, I'll reframe that. There's different ways to do it. Someone I look up to in New York runs a fund called Compound. His name's Mike Dempsey. And he said, one of the hardest things to do in our industry is shameless self-promotion. So how do you showcase what your contributions are without doing it in a way that's like, look at me? And that could be creating really insightful content like you do with your podcast or different or like publishing, writing. It could be hosting events and sharing the events or having people talk about the events. It could be, being an insightful product thinker and having founders and entrepreneurs want to talk to you about your product. But I think part of it is like what you're doing your contribution and having other people know in a meaningful way the contributions that you're making. I think that's a great way to start building your network. Give first and sort of make sure people are aware of it. When you're doing outreach, I think really personalizing it is important. So as I mentioned, we keep talking about Canadians, obviously, but if I'm DMing a Canadian on Twitter or LinkedIn for something, like I'll always lead with fellow Canadian here as the opening line before anything, because it's like, how do I create a sense of connectivity on day one or on the first minute that they see me? I personally use the events I host. So I probably host 2 to 4 dinners or breakfasts a month for different communities, which have allowed me to have a reason to reach out to someone, invite them to this thing I'm doing, and hopefully they'll make meaningful connections there. But again, you've got to figure out what your version of that is. And I also believe that you can reach out to the same person 7 times. The first 3 times you ask them, they might not reply, but the fourth time they might. And then that also comes back to the shameless self-promotion thing. Maybe the first time you reached out, they didn't know who you were, but by the third time, they've seen your podcast and they've been like, holy shit, this guy gets these amazing guests. Like, who is he? I need to meet him. So, you're becoming a familiar face to them by continuing to put effort and put your ego aside and be like, yeah, maybe at first I wasn't interesting to you, but eventually I will be.
You mentioned kind of like a focus on technical founders, but maybe also like folks like that other founder you mentioned from a construction background. Like, how have you kind of seen all these amazing tools, Cursor? There's like multiple tools in this kind of bucket. How have you seen these tools really kind of help maybe someone who's not technical, somewhat technical, like become maybe not become fully technical, but maybe getting closer to that?
I don't, SPC, we wouldn't we struggle to fund non-technical teams who are using these tools. But what we like about these tools is that they make our technical teams 10 times faster and better. Even at SPC now, our team is thinking about how can we use AI more to make us more efficient, us more practical. And I think that the all these AI agents, whether it's Cursor or otherwise, should make you better at your job. But I don't think at scale they can replicate the need for having really technical people involved in things. They should help you get an MVP up faster and cheaper and quicker, but we still believe that it's very important that every team has someone deeply technical who's going to oversee it. Because I think at least so far, these tools do have limitations.
Where have you found like spaces to find folks that would be a good fit for SPC? Is it, hey, so and so has switched their badge to, stealth mode startup, or someone leaves kind of interesting role at interesting company, or like graduates from certain school, drops out? Like, what kind of like, is there common themes, or is it really just very random and like that's random potentially a good thing?
South Park Commons really believes in the value of marketing and venture capital. And South Park Commons also believes in the power of community and network. And I think it's those two things that actually allow us to attract the people that we get to work with. So on the marketing front, we invented the term -1 to 0, or you might have seen the squiggle, which is part of our logo, which is to say that there's lots of early stage investors and partners to help you get from 0 to 1 once you have your idea. Once you have some customers, we'll help you accelerate. Our positioning in the market is, if you're really smart and technical and talented and you want to pursue something big, but maybe you're not 100% sure what that thing is, we've tried to market ourselves to say, come here and we'll help you identify that. And in all those cases I exampled, the construction and the marketing company both came to SPC interested in other things. And we're very comfortable working with you to be like, what is the right and best mountain for you to climb and problem for you to solve? So on the marketing front, and that's also why we do these marquee events with Mark Zuckerberg and Satya Nadella, et cetera, because we want to showcase our platform, but not just our platform and our network, but say, hey, like, this is the place to come to explore, to pursue your curiosities and identify what you want to build, not just hit the ground running on the first average idea you might get. On the community and network side, we think that the best referrals are going to be from people that we've helped, people that know the value of SPC, right? I want to make sure that we are providing a really positive experience for for people in the ecosystem, and they can refer their friends to us. So I would say the SPC network over the years has grown a lot. People that, we call them alumni as well, people that have come through SPC. And like, if we give them a phenomenal experience, we want them to talk about it. We want them to be as proud to say, I'm ex SPC as someone would say, I'm ex Stripe or I'm ex OpenAI.
You mentioned kind of like support there and helping accelerate. What do you find is a good, or what does SPC do from that side of things? Like, is there a cadence to it? Is it a time component? Is it like how many people you're working with? Like, just kind of curious how you've done that really well and you don't become overbearing or maybe companies become reliant on you or something.
Yeah, I would say that we are a full-time commitment in-person community. So our expectation is people working with SPC are in New York, San Francisco, or Bangalore, at least for like, several month period. And it's twofold. It's not to say that we don't think you can build great companies in other places, but it's that we do believe in the value of talent density. And when someone asks what's the biggest value of SPC, yeah, like our team has deep expertise in building companies and investing in companies. And of course, there's value in our team and our network. But actually, I think that the unique thing is the value and expertise of our community members. So the other people who come from all these companies, who come from all this research background or otherwise, who are there committed not only to do their own exploration, but to help other people in their exploration. So they might have been a previous buyer of the product that you're looking to build. They might have been a previous user. They might have tried to build a company exactly the same three months prior and failed, and could tell you all the reasons they failed. They might have raised money from someone that you're considering raising money from and can give you insight on that. So really, we think that the emphasis on in-person engagement in our hubs and our spaces is to create communities of individuals who are going to help other people. So it's not just on us. We're obviously a big part of it, but I actually think that it compounds, given that at any given point there's 50 to 60 other people there who I think can provide really relevant and compelling support.
What have you learned about scaling communities? You obviously have offices in different cities. You work with founders all over the place. You have probably your members of the community are all over the place, maybe concentrated in those three places, but potentially broader. Like, how do you think about kind of scaling community and doing that well and doing it the SPC way?
Yeah, this is a really important question because scaling, there's no shortage of great communities that were started that were unable to scale. And I think there's two reasons that this happens. I think when your incentive structure switches to quantity over quality, it's probably the biggest reason most communities fail. It's like, okay, we started with this amazing group of people. It worked. We now want to grow. In order to grow, we've got to drop the quality of people coming into it, which now makes it less appealing for people who are of that quality. And then I need to go get more people, so I'm lowering the quality even more. So I think that the race to quantity always negatively impacts quality, which I think can destroy communities. So even though we're in three cities, every city is still relatively small, highly curated, highly selective. And I think we can be tempted to say, let's grow it. But actually, we understand that curation and quality is one of the most important things to continue to make SPC or any community a place that new people want to join. And I think the second thing is not riding on your laurels. So you have to constantly be refreshing your networks. What was the cool company to say you worked at last year is not going to be the same as the cool company today. What was the cool place to do research out yesterday, or the cool topic, right? Like, it was the creator economy, then it was blockchain and cryptocurrencies and Web3, and now it's AI. But these things are constantly changing, and you have to be able to be adaptable to it. So I want to be at the forefront of this emerging trend, this emerging technology, and I want to be at the forefront of where talented people are and are coming from. And in a lot of cases, it also means being willing to work with young people. Like, it's it's not easy when you're in your 30s to connect with people in your early 20s, but those are, generally speaking, like the highest energy entrepreneurs, the most ambitious folks. So like a willingness to go and engage and learn about a younger generation is also really important. And putting your ego aside, knowing that these people do not have the experience and credentials, but might actually know something that we don't.
I'm curious just on like, are those the things that kind of give you the edge, especially from like a US technology perspective, when there's IC, when there's, hey, ex founder of this, a venture firm might just write them a blank check. Like, I know these are kind of maybe more rare circumstances, I understand, but I'm curious if like, are those things that you're talking about really how you kind of keep that edge, how you keep fresh, and how like not so much compete, but just like keep that edge and that brand there?
Yeah, we don't try to position ourselves against anyone else. We think that there is a large enough amount of entrepreneurs that are looking for different things and that different funds or different programs can support. What we try to focus on is what we think we're best in class at, which is helping highly curious and technical people actually just discover and explore the right problem that they want to solve. And I think that it does self-select for a type of operator or researcher or entrepreneur who sees the value in making sure that they're actually solving the right problem and who wants to pursue something hard and then move fast. So I make the analogy a lot. It's like a slingshot. Sometimes you have to pull back to shoot forward faster. It's not to say we don't believe in speed and velocity. We very much believe in speed and velocity. But once you find the right thing, once you realize that this is actually my life's work and something that I should be spending the next 10 years on. So I think if we stay true to that, and those are the types of people we're looking for, where if folks are trying to do something else, that there are other people that they can go to.
What things do you really love about venture from like a personal standpoint? Like where do you find is like your personal edge? How do you kind of have that balance of like, like SPC has an amazing brand, but there's also kind of like that Dylan aspect to it. How do you kind of like think about that and where do you kind of play?
I'm 5'6" and I'm an only child. I think I have two double-sided sword of extroversion and a chip on my shoulder. So I am very much energized by constantly being with other people. And I think that there are many types of ways to build community or to invest. But I think what I've leaned into my entire career, actually like dating back to throwing parties in high school, is I like bringing people together and creating social experiences. I was throwing parties in high school. I started a charity after I graduated Western, specifically in Toronto around creating awareness and education through community-led events. And then moving into venture, have leaned into constantly bringing great people together, constantly being excited by meeting new people and learning what they're up to. And I think it's just a function of being incredibly extroverted, which are side effects, I guess, of being a short only child. But I think that that's the edge of Dylan. And as I said before, there are many ways to do this. But like I think for me, as long as I have the energy to continue to want to meet people, connect people, and curate people, I think that that's what allows. And fortunately, that's very consistent with the SBC mantra of community, which is why it's been a great place outside of more traditional venture funds.
What kind of trends are you seeing with what founders are working on? And I know I'm trying to like drill into specifically what these companies are doing, but just like more generally, like obviously AI all the time, but like, is there other kind of things that you're seeing that are interesting just from a general high level trends perspective?
It's a hard question to answer because I think we're seeing everything, but I guess we can categorize it in three ways. There's the infrastructure side. So what are the new enablers of AI that people are trying to build? There's the applied AI, which is like, okay, what's a vertical that I think is ripe for technological innovation and they don't know about AI yet. So I'm going to take it there and teach them. And that could be healthcare or education or finance. And the reality is that they do know about AI. And there's also 100 other people that have had the same idea as you. But there's obviously a lot of teams who are trying to do cursor for X or applied AI for Y industry. And then I think that the third category, which is increasingly becoming popular, is robotics and hardware. So what does the future look like? I think that if you've been to San Francisco, you've probably been in a Waymo, which is the most incredible experience. It is a beautiful, clean car with no driver that operates like an Uber. It's actually becoming cheaper because the labor costs there's no labor. They can run 24/7.
Uh-huh.
It's an amazing experience. And you walk into a Waymo and you're like, we're not far away from this probably being the way people take transportation all over the country or over the world. Taking another step forward, you're like, well, we're going to probably have robots doing a lot of different things. Probably not in people's homes, but we don't need. There's so many aspects of construction or nuclear facilities work or mining work that like humans shouldn't be doing. Or manufacturing and supply chain, and I think that that's another trend where it's like we're actually seeing a lot of people want to pursue hardware enabled businesses where historically VCs have been allergic to that.
I'm just curious more your thoughts around just like New York tech in general. Like obviously there was kind of felt like there was like this trend towards Miami maybe a couple years ago. I feel like that wind has maybe shifted towards New York a bit. You obviously have amazing companies like Ramp and all the huge finance industry, huge companies based out there are non-tech. Just kind of curious like what you've seen from that tech ecosystem and maybe there's little nuances or just kind of interesting things there.
San Francisco is still the Mecca and Medina of uh, the tech industry. I think that AI was a very big resurgence for San Francisco. It became a place again where people pursuing technology for the sake of technology were actually creating value. And previous technology trends before, so like blockchain or crypto, for example, there wasn't as much value creation in the tech. With AI, that pursuing technology has become valuable again. I would say New York has other aspects of expertise, proximity to customers. So if you're building a B2B company and you're selling to law firms or financial institutions or government and its proximity to DC, like the ability to hire industry experts and to sell to your customers here is much stronger. So for that type of business. And actually, New York has historically always been a very big consumer and creative hub, proximity to the fashion and film industry here. And the fact that I think people that do decide to live in New York typically are a little bit more cultural or interested in more cultural things outside of work, which leads to building, I think a more creative type of company that you see more in New York. The seed data has shown that there are basically the same activity level in New York as San Francisco. The growth stage funding in San Francisco is, you know, years ahead of everyone else. The hypothesis on someone being bullish on New York has to be that you believe that all these early stage companies that are being started and funded are going to eventually grow into that. And the last thing I like about New York is New York's proximity to Europe is really interesting in that it's much closer geographically and from a time zone perspective from entrepreneurs from France or Germany or the UK or Sweden to set up their HQs in the States. So Spotify, for example, Swedish company, UiPath, Eastern European company, like their HQs are in New York, not San Francisco, because of that proximity. So I think that there's another value prop that New York can have, which is as more and more Europeans want to come and start businesses here, New York is a more convenient place to do that.
What has been like your kind of like biggest learning in venture? Maybe it's something that you had some thoughts about and those things have changed, your perceptions change on that. Maybe it's just solidified. Just kind of curious like what the biggest learning takeaway has been so far in your career so far.
Yeah, there's a few things. So I've been doing this now for almost 10 years, and you just start to pattern match. I've never built a company myself. I've never fundraised myself. I don't claim to have done those things, but I've seen hundreds of people try. So you start to take learnings from that. I would say, uh, I think it's I think that fundraising should be treated as a means to an end. I think that the founders that love to fundraise for the sake of fundraising, while some of them can work really well by getting their companies to, incredibly well funded and hiring the operators to do it. I think in most cases, actually, those founders typically don't operate as well, aren't as interested in their product, aren't as interested in their customers, and just want to talk to investors. And one of the founders of the fund I worked at in the UK said that every entrepreneur comes to us because they want funding, press, and customers. And the reality is, if you just build a great product that customers love, you'll get funding and people will talk about you. So, like being driven by that versus funding for the sake of it and press for the sake of it, I think is like a signal, like a softer signal. I think the three funds I've worked at now, like it's pretty clear that it's very difficult for teams without someone technical on the founding team to succeed. There have been cases of that, but I think for the most part, there needs to at least be one technical co-founder on the team. Unclear or not, solo founder versus team. I think that we are happy to invest in solo founders, but I think it's really hard. Starting a company is lonely, making decisions is tough, and not having co-founders to go through that, it just makes what is already an incredible difficult journey like a lot harder. But I'm not ready to definitively say that you can't do it alone. It's just more of a preference of ours. I guess other things I've learned more recently is as all these AI tools have made it easy for anyone to spin up a product or business, we're seeing that any time that there is remotely a good idea or a company with traction, the next day five others pop up. And then investors hear about one company doing really well. So they're like, well, great. We want to go have our own horse in this race,
Mm.
which is creating a new, even if you think of just the coding tools, right? Like Windsurf and Cursor and Replit, like pick a vertical. There's 10 legal AI companies. There's 10 prior authorization software companies for the healthcare billing space. So how do you stand out in a sea of competition where your moats are changing? I think it's something that I'm still learning on or I'm excited to see how that plays out. That's sort of a new thing, that a new trend that we're seeing too.
Curious with like all the different funds you've worked at, people you've interviewed, people you interact with at all these dinners or anything. Do you have like mentors or advisors, or are you really just kind of a sponge and you're absorbing all this amazing stuff and kind of like bringing that in? I'm just kind of curious, like being exposed to all this, how has that really changed how you kind of operate?
Yeah, the word mentor is a tricky one because no one wants to take on mentees because there's some implicit
Hmm.
commitment associated with it. So I don't know if any of these people I would consider to or would consider me a mentee, but I look up to them and consider them mentors. And I think venture specifically is it's not an apprenticeship industry. So you don't have management that you would at like a traditional company. When I moved to New York about 4.5 years ago, I'm very fortunate that I got involved with the people who were running the C100 at the time, which was Laura Bueller, Michael Hirschfeld, Andre Chiru. All of them were Canadian, and all of them were living abroad. So Michael was in New York, and Laura was in San Francisco, and Andre's been living abroad, and they all empathize with the fact that being a Canadian leaving their home country for the first time to live in a new country without a network there is difficult, and in different ways, all of them were so generous with their time and energy for me, and I'm infinitely grateful to them. And I think it for there was like I wasn't asking them for anything specific except like you've all done this. How do I start? And all of them opened up their networks to me, and I why I'm so indebted to the Canadians is because I think that Canadians in the States have been the people that have helped move my career along the most, and have actually become like very good friends of mine as well. And I had no business when I moved to New York for the first time, like socializing with these people, but like they wanted to help me because they'd been through it themselves. So that's why I'm like super passionate about whether I'm doing it myself or other organizations are willing to step up to support the Canadian expat community because like that's who my mentors were.
I like to wrap it up with my typical closing question and just want to know how do you deal with hard times? They come and go throughout a career. Is there anything that kind of helps you out, makes you feel good when they're happening?
I had an accident in 2016 where I was in and out of hospital for almost a year, and that's actually when I started my charity. And a mentor of mine back then said that I default to productivity. It's probably an unhealthy way to deal with hard times because instead of embracing the hard times and thinking about them and reflecting on it, I default to trying to do something productive. That could be going to the gym, but I'm embarrassed to say that to you because I know how jacked you are. But, it's been like, okay, this thing has happened. Instead of waiting for it to get better, I just try to put my energy and time on creating something else. So as I mentioned, after my accident, I started that charity in Canada. When I had left Expo last year, a year and a half ago, between being at Expo and joining South Park Commons, I actually like ramped up all these events. I was like, okay, like I'm no longer actively investing right now. I could like go and travel, or I could go and relax, or I for whatever options people do. But I was like, well, actually, I'm going to ramp up and I'm going to start doing the thing I love, which is hosting these events and dinners for people in tech, and just did those 10x. And like that's how I filled my time in that space. So it's for me, it's defaulting to productivity. It's like what this thing happened that is not ideal. The situation is not what I wanted. I'm going to just distract myself by going to do something productive. And I don't know if that's like a cop out answer.
No, I love it. I think it's a really good way to focus on things. Dylan, this has been a lot of fun. I know we've been chatting for a few years. You've always been very supportive of the podcast, so appreciate the time and glad we can make this happen.
Likewise, and Evan, I just want to say, as there have been different organizations over the past couple of years that have come and go around supporting Canadians abroad or Canadians everywhere, I think you are doing the best you're fulfilling such an important need for profiling these people and creating visibility and awareness, because I think that there's a lot of Canadians that don't know about all these other Canadians around. And like even when I host some of my events now and I'm looking for more Canadians, I just go look at your podcast archive because I'm like I don't even have to look for them anymore because you're finding them all. So I really love the promoting the work that you're doing promoting them, and I yeah, I mean there's 10 more, there's 100 more that you can have on. So I'm very honored that you had.
Thank you so much, Dylan. This has been a lot of fun. Thank you, everyone, for listening to the podcast. The most important thing that you can do is follow the show on listening and viewing platforms, primarily Spotify, Apple Podcasts, if you use any other type of podcast player, YouTube, X, and more. This is one of the most meaningful things you can do is obviously sharing the podcast, but also just following the podcast on these platforms is the most important. That way we don't get lost in the algorithm of other social media platforms and you get the episodes straight to you automatically. Thank you for following, subscribing on these platforms.